Thank you for tuning in to this short webinar. My name is Nick Oakley, and I'm the Turkey Program Leader for the Missouri Department of Conservation. I'm going to speak to you today about the turkey history, turkey biology, and some things we have coming up. So let's dive in. I consider this statement, the Missouri Department of Conservation's mission statement, to be my marching orders: to protect and manage wild turkeys and to facilitate and provide opportunity to use, enjoy, and learn about them. To get better understanding about where things stand on the protect and manage front, let's take a moment to remember where we have been, and then we can look at a few figures and talk specific numbers from the recent past. The turkey population in Missouri at the turn of the 20th century was probably only a few thousand birds. In the 1950s, birds from the Ozarks were moved to patches of highly managed habitat in an effort to reestablish a statewide population. This sort of work was going on throughout the country, and later in the 20th century, turkeys were taken to many other states to help establish their populations as well. Now, this is a true conservation success story, and it's something that Missourians should all be proud of. The first spring hunting season took place in 1959, and over that short season, 94 total turkeys were harvested. Since then, the turkey population went through a period of tremendous growth, and then, more recently, some contraction. As you can see from this figure, harvest increased from 94 to over 60,000 birds in just 45 years. Peak harvest came in 2004, but we've seen fairly significant declines in harvest since then. In 2021, harvest was down to around 34,500 birds. Happily, in 2023, harvest rebounded to over 44,500 turkeys. I discuss harvest so much because it's a good indicator of where the population is. If all things are equal and harvest increases, you'd expect that the population has increased as well. Another important thing to look at is production, and that's the number of poults each hen has on average in Missouri. Now, this is likely a figure that many of you have seen before, and it shows a decline in production that seems too drastic or dramatic to be sustainable. But let's take a second to discuss the figure, and then I'll go into more detail. Now, first you see that the production has gone through three primary phases. The first phase is the restoration phase, and that's when we're moving birds around the state and things are starting to get settled. The exponential growth phase is when birds have established and the population is growing and expanding naturally into new areas. And then what I call the maintenance phase. In this phase, population growth rates and production slow as the population approaches carrying capacity. Now, carrying capacity is the term biologists use to describe the point at which a population can sustain itself long term. For turkeys, this is easiest to imagine as a population density. The landscape can contain some number of birds per square mile, but any more than that number, and you're likely to see a population decline in the years that follow. To complicate things further, carrying capacity is variable across the landscape. If there are more resources, habitat, and space in Boone County than in Adair County, for example, then Boone County will be able to sustain a higher density of turkeys than Adair County. Boone County, in this example, would have a higher carrying capacity for turkeys than Adair County. So that decline, though it seems really problematic, is in some part expected and a sign that the population may be at or near carrying capacity. Note that when our harvest is at its peak in 2005, production was well below 2.0. That all said, carrying capacity is not set in stone, and habitat resources will dictate where it ends up. If we want to increase the population, research has shown us that we first need to figure out what is behind the low production seen in recent years. In other words, we need to better understand what is limiting our carrying capacity, because we all want the same thing here, and that's more turkeys. So how do we go about getting more turkeys? The natural thought is that we need to address a population decline by decreasing harvest. In the case of wild turkeys, however, this may not have as much of an effect as it seems. One of the primary reasons that reducing harvest this year won't cause a big uptick in the population next year has to do with the reproductive ecology of wild turkeys. So turkeys employ what's called a lek mating system, and in short, that means that gobblers perform displays for females then travel around and choose the best male to mate with, and that the dominant gobbler in the area does the majority of the breeding. Now it's really important to note that the vast majority of non-dominant gobblers do have the ability to breed should they get that opportunity. And perhaps most importantly for our conversation, once the majority of breeding has occurred, males are largely irrelevant until the following breeding season. Now this is why Missouri's season starts later than many of our neighbors, so that the majority of our harvest occurs after the peak in breeding season. This breeding strategy and the structure of Missouri's spring season means that we can sustainably harvest a pretty high proportion of gobblers each season, around 30%. Adult hen survival, on the other hand, is key to population growth. Modeling has shown that hen harvest rates of less than 4% are necessary for a population to be sustainable. In other words, we cannot remove more than 4% of the hens each year, or we'll start to see population declines. Happily, Missouri is well below both the gobbler harvest rate and the hen harvest rate levels of concern. This all adds up to indicate that our season structure and harvest are sustainable. So if we want more turkeys, and I know I do, research has shown that the most reliable way to increase the population is by increasing the quantity, quality, and connectivity of turkey brooding and nesting habitat. Okay, so what about the second half of that mission? To facilitate and provide opportunity for all citizens to use, enjoy, and learn about these resources. The best way to see how we're doing in balancing the conservation with opportunity is to see how hunter participation is doing. Sadly, hunter participation has been on the decline for several years pretty much across the board. Spring turkey hunting participation started to decline in 2004, and since 2017, participation is down more than 13%. Over the same 5-year period, youth hunter retention has declined 19%, meaning that the number of youth hunters that tried hunting and stuck with it has declined by 19%. Surveys and other work like that have found that common barriers to entry are the lack of mentors for new hunters and the lack of time to hunt and the lack of opportunity to hunt. I want to zoom out for a second to discuss why this is important. Some may be thinking, less hunters means better hunting for me, and that has certainly been a thought that's run through my head more than once. However, it's important to remember that hunting and hunters form a really important, often very vocal and powerful advocacy base that we all benefit from. Not only for hunting, but for other things like public land access, conservation movements, of which turkeys are a clear beneficiary of, and other traditional pastimes. So keep that in the back of your mind when we start to think about ways to reverse the trend on declining hunter participation. The most straightforward way to increase opportunity would be to extend shooting hours. Missouri is one of only a few states in our region that does not allow all-day hunting during the spring. This regulation was put into place early on as a way to provide an early hunting opportunity while still being cautious about the impacts of hunting on a population that was much smaller than it is today. Many states had a similar structure, almost all of which have moved to an all-day season. But what this does is gives us an opportunity to learn from what other states saw, should we decide to go that route. First and foremost, we'd expect harvest should increase by about 10%. Using the 2023 harvest as an example, that would come out to about 4,500 birds, or 1 bird per 10,000 acres. Other states found that around 80% of the harvest came before noon, a similar percentage of gobblers were harvested relative to jakes, and even the days in which the majority of the harvest takes place, like the first week and the weekends, those stay more or less the same. But you ask, did other states see an increase in hunter recruitment, especially as it relates to the youth hunters? And indeed they did, right? And this makes sense because kids who are in school during the turkey season don't necessarily have the opportunity to hunt after school if the season is closed at 1 p.m. Now, MDC is seeking public input on a suite of possible regulatory considerations for the spring and fall seasons. You have the opportunity to go and make your voice heard. A link to our website and a QR code will be provided on the last 2 slides of this presentation, so please visit those. Since we've started to look at seasons and regulations, it makes sense to review the fall season as well. See if there are opportunities to make changes that have a net positive on the resource or its users. Our fall season, in contrast to our spring season, is generally more liberal than our neighbors. We have a lot of opportunity in the form of season length, and our bag limit of 4 between the firearms and archery season is larger than average. At the same time, hunter participation in fall hunting has declined significantly since its peak in the late 1980s, despite a great deal of opportunity. Our best guess as to why comes down to competing activities in the fall. We've seen a major increase in the number of folks out enjoying archery deer season, and I suspect that has driven much of the decline in fall turkey hunting participation. I think it's safe to say that the spring season is also now the primary turkey hunting season, not only in Missouri but across the country. That may not have been the case in the 80s, but it seems to be that way now. Further, fall harvest, in which hens are taken at rates similar to or higher than males, has come under the scrutiny of folks who see reducing fall harvest as a way to increase the population. I myself, not more than a few minutes ago, mentioned that hen survival is more important than gobbler survival when it comes to turkey population dynamics. However, especially in light of the declining participation, fall harvest is not having a significant impact on the population. We are still under the recommended hen harvest rate. We have seen a decided shift in preference to the spring season, however, so perhaps it's time to consider a change. The majority of regulation changes being considered for the fall season deal with ways to reduce the bag limit from 4 to 2. While a decrease in the number of days may have a similar overall effect, fall weather makes that a potentially perilous option. With a bag limit of 2, there would be a modest decrease in harvest, but relatively limited impact on overall opportunity. Realistically, a decrease in fall harvest will almost certainly not have a significant impact on the turkey population moving forward. But either way you feel about it, I hope you'll take the time to leave us a comment. Just to reiterate, nothing that I have presented today as it relates to a change in regulations has been proposed, much less approved. We are still in the phase in which we're seeking input. So to that end, a random sample of turkey hunters will be sent a survey asking them to rate their level of support for a variety of changes to the regulatory structure for both the spring and fall seasons. Anyone can submit a comment to the website between now and October 9th, 2023. Again, that website can be accessed by typing in the blue web address or scanning the QR code you see on your screen. Please take the time to do so. Your input has an important role in shaping how we proceed. That is all I have to share with you today. Once again, here's the link or QR code you can use to get to our website. I appreciate your time and attention.